8 years ago, convinced by the church he was a member of that his sexuality was an abomination, my next guest stood in the cold and dark, wondering if life was worth living. He'd just told a friend from church that he was gay, and her response was, "I can't condone that." For 10 years, James De Villiers tried to rid himself of his homosexuality, spending hours in church, in his words, praying away the gay, having members of the congregation praying to God to restore his masculinity. In small groups dedicated to recovering homosexuals, he and other sinners were made to watch documentaries about how gay people can never be happy and can never have healthy relationships. It sounds horrific, actually. James says that this type of conversion therapy isn't uncommon in South Africa, and he shares his story with us this morning during Pride Month. Just last month, the LGBTQ rights organisation Outright released a groundbreaking report titled Health Ethics and the Eradication of Conversion Practice in Africa, providing a comprehensive analysis, really, of the prevalence and nature and impact of conversion practices on LGBTQI plus people in Africa. And it's with great pleasure that we welcome James to the show to share his story. James, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Yeah, thanks for having me. And happy Pride Month.
Yeah, happy Pride Month to you too. I was reading your account of the conversion therapy that you underwent, and it was a really hard read. It is mind-boggling that, I say in this day and age, and I want to stop using that phrase because it's almost to say that we're all we live in a terribly liberal and progressive and accepting society, and that why are we worrying about these types of things when actually the reality is that members of the LGBTQI plus community continue to face extreme persecution, and to sort of say, in this day and age is almost a bit negating. Can you take us back to that moment, really, where you were standing there in the dark, an hour outside of Stellenbosch, in the cold, thinking, what's the point, really?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of emotions that obviously go through one's mind. I grew up in a very small town called Ceres, just outside of CapeTalk, and from a young age, this idea that kind of marriage is meant for a man and a woman, kind of what the roles are for men, etc., was instilled in me from a very young age. And I think with that came a lot of shame, because understanding that you don't really entirely fit into this expectation that society had on you, especially if you grew up in a small Afrikaans community like I did. And I think standing there in this farm, it was outside Franschhoek, realizing that this is this part of you that you've tried so hard and so desperately to change, and it still not wants to change, I think really just brings about a sense of defeat. And loneliness. I think you're also very lonely in that moment, thinking that you're the only person in the world that's going through this.
Right.
So that's kind of the first thoughts that come to mind.
Yeah, talk to me about that. You say, you tried to change. The message that had been given to you was it was possible to change. I mean, let's start there. Did you genuinely believe that? Did you believe that if you prayed hard enough, watched enough documentaries, went to church enough, and had people lay hands on you, that you genuinely would be able to change your sexuality? Was that a belief that you genuinely held?
Yeah, so I think growing up, so I joined this kind of very conservative church grouping at grade 8, and I was very bullied in school. So I was really bullied quite badly in school, never really had any friends. Rugby was the sport of the day, and I obviously wasn't the most active sport person growing up. And this grouping from around grade 8, so we had small groups, etc. They just believed that God can restore my masculinity, kind of. And at that stage, because I'm young and because I'm so confused and because I'm so desperate for a sense of family and a sense of acceptance, I was so grateful that here was a grouping of people that finally showed some interest in me.
Wow.
Finally gave me a sense of self-confidence that I never had. But at the same time, this grouping told me, you know what, these sexual urges that you might have, these desires that you might have, they're not from God. There's something wrong here. There's something fundamentally wrong about who you are. And I think growing up, I was told, and even not only in this church grouping, but also just in my direct family circles, my parents' church, the Dutch Reformed Church, etc. There was a belief that that the reason why I am the way I am is because of social conditioning. It's because from a young age, I wasn't accepted by the boys, or my dad didn't show me enough affection, etc. And that because of those behaviors, I had this almost abnormal desire for same-sex attraction. And it was only in my adult life, when I got older, where I started to realize that no, it's not because of social conditioning. It's because I was born different from childbirth. It's because I was treated different from an early age because I was different from an early age. And I can't blame people's treatment because of that. And I think what's great, subsequently, since I kind of accepted myself, the relationships around me got better. Because only once you start accepting yourself and you love yourself, are you able to have better relationships, not only with yourself and your friends, but also with your family. I think my dad's relationship with me is 10 times better than it was growing up.
Really?
Simply because there's a level of acceptance, there's a level of affirmation that I just never experienced before.
Tell me about the conversations that were happening within the church. I mentioned that, you would go every Sunday and people would lay hands on you and pray to restore your masculinity, as if there's a link between homosexuality and a lack of masculinity. Mind-boggling. And also how you found your way out of that. Like, was there a trigger point that you said, you know what, actually, this is madness. This isn't right. And also there's a lot, this is going to be quite a loaded question, how you then, that I think an awful lot of gay people have to reconcile, particularly if you are aligned with religion or that you feel religiously inclined. There is a real kind of dichotomy, a real issue against what might be perceived to be written in any one particular Bible or Quran or whatever it might be, and your sexuality. So starting with the you being in church and having those conversations, and how you felt about that, and then how you found your way out.
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned that I joined this community, this conservative charismatic community around the grade 8, and at the same, as much as it was incredible for me, because finally I had a group of people that spoke life over me and affirmed me, it was also starting to build this shame of this thing that I couldn't change. And then there was kind of these summer camps that took place in December, where there was a specific, I don't know how to describe it, like lectures almost for people that struggled with. And remember, I'm grade 8, I'm like 12, 13, but now there's these lectures about people that struggle with sexual immorality and whatever, and then the topic of homosexuality always comes up a part of that. And I remember that first summer camp in grade 8, I actually went to the front and I told the pastor, like, I'm struggling with this thing. It's really difficult. Wow. And he started praying for me. And I felt so like overwhelmed, because I'm like, yes, there's hope. I'm going to be able to change this.
Sure.
But I think the main aim is that the main point I'm trying to make is there was a building up of shame, and this shame grew every single month. And, I started fasting, and I started praying, and I started reading books on how to cure this. And it started forming this kind of cycle in my life. I would say every 2 to 3 months. So I would 2 to 3 months, I would realize one day, like, shucks, this is not changing, this is not working. I would sin according to the Bible, and then I would kind of fall into a very heavy depression for a week or two. Very just like in my room, kind of crying out to God, asking him, what do I do? I've tried everything. I'm trying my very best. And then read a couple of scriptures and I'd be encouraged again. And so that would kind of last for a month or two. And then I fall back into this kind of weak depression. And that cycle repeated itself. I would say from like grade 9, grade 10, I went to university to Stellenbosch, where I became a full congregant, started joining these proper small groups for recovering homosexuals.
This is wild to me. Sorry. I mean, I know it sounds, but it really is. It just sounds, well, first of all, what you've described is abuse to me. To be talking to 12-year-old children and telling them that their sexuality is an abomination, that it's something that they can have prayed out of them or grow out of, and instilling that sense of shame in a small child, in anybody, is a form of abuse. So I want to talk about any possible resentment that you have lingering. But I'll talk about that in just a second. But the idea that you are joining groups for recovering homosexuals. I mean, how successful can that possibly be, James? And I'm making light of it, but really, I really do. I think it's just absolutely abusive. What were the conversations happening in these groups, James, of recovering homosexuals?
It was a lot of prayer.
Right, sure. Yeah.
The conversation. I remember distinct conversations speaking about kind of the practices that you're doing, like how are you limiting yourself from things like masturbation or pornography, and then kind of the introduction of things that were called accountability partners. So every single time that you did one of these sins, you were expected to tell your accountability partner, and that they would pray with you, and you had to repent. And it was really just this horrible. Thinking of it now, I even just get this feeling of shame building up, because you were really taught to think about stuff that's quite natural. I think for a straight person, these things are quite natural. They're kind of part of the growing up journey. But for me, it became something that I had to kind of work my entire being towards changing and towards fighting.
Yeah.
And then there was, I specifically remember there was this documentary series that we watched, and I think this is one of the things that still kind of hurts me the most to this day. There was this documentary series that we watched, and I can't remember the name, but it's very homoerotic in retrospect, because the introduction of the documentary was like these men in like a waterfall and coming out of the waterfall, which obviously represents like baptism or new life. Sure. And then in the series, it was American based, and they spoke to previous ex-gays, basically people that saw the light. And there was one guy, he was in his 60s, I would say late 60s. He had when someone has like overused drugs, almost like that very kind of skinny face, complexion. And then he started speaking and said when he joined the gay culture, he was told, just find a partner, any partner, so that you guys could have sex with how many people you wanted to, because that's what gay culture is about. It's all about using people. It's all about having sex with as many people as possible. It's all about lust. And when in my darkest fears, in my darkest moments, that's the image that comes back to me, because I think I'm so afraid. I grew up bullied. I grew up kind of ostracized, and my biggest desire in life was to feel a sense of family and a sense of community.
And you were told that was not possible if you continued down this demonic path, essentially.
Exactly. I was told that my biggest desire was going to be just my body being used and abused, and not finding wholesomeness and happiness. And I was told that not only through the documentary, but at church every Sunday, by my family, by my mother. And it really took a lot of kind of reconditioning to realize that, this thing that the world really wanted to take away from me, really wanted me to make feel ashamed about, is still possible for me. And I think, just coming back, I think the reason why society is so afraid of homosexuals or kind of gay, whatever, is because there's this preconceived idea that they are coming against family values, or they're coming against the idea of family units. And I think there might be people in this world that, yes, they probably do practice risky behavior, and they do things that's not in line with the traditional family norms, which comes out of place of their own hurts and their own experiences. But there's also people like me that really just want to live a life of family, of connection, of building a community where I can be included and I can be proud of. And it's part of fighting those ideas within society. And I had to fight that disease with my own mother, and to tell her, yes, the Bible speaks about orgies and all of these things, but that's really not what I'm doing. That's really not what I'm involved in. So I don't know why you include me with that conversation.
How is your relationship now? I mean, I can't. The thought that one might not be accepted by their own immediate family, by the people who made them, your own mother and father, is something that for an awful lot of us, we simply can't imagine what that must be like, to be told by your own parents that you're a part of you is wrong, was made wrong, or or you are choosing something, because that seems to be the narrative, is that you've chosen this. You are choosing something that makes that part of you unlovable, unworthy, unacceptable. How do you then create a relationship with those people where, I mean, has it been about their unlearning, or has it been about your acceptance of their position?
Yeah, you asked me a little bit earlier about like kind of reflection, if there's any resentment, etc. I
Yes,
think,
yes.
and this kind of, when you ask this, it kind of brings me back to this, because I think in the moment when you're going through the motions, you obviously they have intense form of resentment. I think there was moments where I thought like, okay, I don't have a family, I don't have an immediate family anymore because they can't accept these things from me, etc. But as with time and etc., I have gotten the gift of understanding, and I've gotten the gift of empathy as well, because I think for as much as this has been a big shock for me and a big accepting journey for me, and I would say about 15 years and still ongoing, the same had to take place with my mother, the same had to take place with my family. For them, it was also a readjusting how they looked at society and how they understand the Bible. When I look at my relationship with God right now, I think obviously was intensely involved in the church, like did every single welcome team and whatever. But my relationship with God right now is much better than I would think it ever was in my entire life, because now I come to Him not as someone who's kind of ashamed and hiding away, but as someone that really lacks himself and is able to come to God as a full human being and bring every single part of Him. And that's someone that doesn't look at God as someone that points at Him and just wants to see all the flaws and see how many times have you messed up today, but someone that really wants to do life with Him and journey with Him. So speaking about my mother, yes, I think she obviously grew up in an Afrikaans household, a very conservative household. So I think her first reaction to me was one of shock, was one of, as any caring mother would, trying to bring their child back onto a path that she thought right. So there was, I think the first thing that she told me was I had two dreams for my children. The one is that they'd be happy, and the one is that they go to heaven, with the implication that I might not be going to heaven.
Sure, that's heavy.
But that's not the person that I know anymore. There's been a massive change. There's been a massive learning and a massive understanding. And I think as much as it's still challenging for her today, there's at least a willingness to love and understand.
Have you been able to take a partner home?
Back in the day, no, but today I do, and today I'm in a long-standing relationship.
Yeah. And is it awkward? Does he get called your special friend?
He definitely does, and she last year referred to him as, "Aren't you guys just good friends?"
Right.
Said,
no, Mum.
No. but I think that's part of the journey, and I appreciate it. So I appreciate that she takes the time and work.
You're showing enormous grace. I have to say, James, from my humble perspective, you show enormous grace. I understand that our children's journeys as parents, whatever, sexuality, life choices, careers, whatever, are not easy. However, I do feel that you are showing enormous grace. Listen, you said in the article, and it was a number of years ago, that these practices, these conversion practices, are not, your experience was not unique, that this is going on across South Africa. Do you feel that they should be banned? I mean, what you've described to me, as I said, it sounds like abuse, and it sounds like it has the potential to create long-held and deep trauma, and requiring people like yourself to have to go through a real sort of healing process. And by the sounds of it, you have done a lot of work in that area, but still are doing that. Should they be banned? I mean, I know what my thoughts are, but it's not, this isn't a community that I'm a part of, but I'm part of the world community. And when I see people being abused and traumatized, I think whatever's happening that causes that should stop.
Yeah, so I just want to, if I can just add this. You spoke about showing grace for my family. So there was a point in this journey with my parents and my mom. So I moved to Johannesburg. I was a journalist at News 24, and I moved to Johannesburg, and my mother kept on sending me scriptures every morning. And then at one moment, I just told her, like, you have to stop. Like, you have to choose. Like, this can't continue. This is starting to become a boundary for me. And then my dad told her something and basically said, my wife, we've got 2 children. The one things are good with, like he's followed the path that we wanted him to follow. Like he's married, has kids, and then we have another child. And if we continue on this current path, we're going to lose that child. We're going
Wow.
to lose our relationship with that child. And I think that's the message that we kind of have to tell people is, you obviously can have a strict boundary and you can reject people and you can make them feel shamed. Because I think my mother's reaction was also a lot of shame. She was thinking of how society would treat her. She was thinking of how her family would treat her.
Yeah.
But we have to always enter these conversations with love and care and acceptance, because that's also what God is. Jesus went and ate with the prostitutes. He didn't sit with the least, and he sat with the worst of us in society. And I think that's the lesson out of all of this. Coming back to conversion therapy, I actually think that we shouldn't ban conversion therapy. And the reason for this is the reason why I'm saying this. I obviously think conversion therapy and the practice is harmful to everyone involved. I myself feel ashamed that I was someone that prayed over other people, other men, that God should restore their masculinity. I was the one that also tried to pray the gay away for other people because I was so indoctrinated. But by banning something doesn't mean it's going to stop. You're only going to drive this thing underground. You're only going to make sure that these practices happen in quiet and where it's not in the open. I think the way we attack this and end this is through education and awareness. Because the more we spread awareness, the more we educate people, the more we change society's conceptions about these things, the better it becomes for all of us. We have to realize I'm very lucky. My life was never threatened because of my sexuality. I've never been in a place where I felt endangered to be alive. But there's people in this country and communities in this country where people are being killed
100%.
simply because of their sexuality. There's women being correctively raped. And there's
that's
men
an awful term, but yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
There's men that we have a former president in KwaZulu-Natal saying that these practices are unacceptable, threatening the lives of people. And the only way we change that is not by banning that behavior. It's not by saying this is illegal, but it's by changing the conceptions that people have in their minds. And thank you so much for this platform so that we can help by doing that.
No, absolute pleasure. James, thank you so much for so candidly and openly and honestly and bravely sharing your story. I still think that you showed an awful lot of grace, but well done to Papa De Villiers for saying that also to your mum. I appreciate it and appreciate your time this morning. James De Villiers sharing his story of having undergone conversion therapy.